Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today begins our third and final way of solving quadratic equations. The method that we're going to be using to sum this all up is using the quadratic formula. The nice thing about this method is it doesn't matter what parts of your equation you're given. You can always use this formula to solve. With that being said, our quadratic formula is x is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. You're going to notice that the part under the radical is highlighted in blue. It's because that part is what we call the discriminant. The discriminant is pretty special. If, when you do that discriminant, you get a positive number, you end up with two real solutions. So that means you're going to have two different answers, which means if we were to graph this, our beautiful parabola would either hit it 2 times like this. Or you could have a frowny face one, in which case it would still hit 2 times. If when you go ahead and graph this, you get a number equal to 0 under the radical, you're only going to have one solution, meaning your little parabola comes down and it touches the axis and bounces back up again. So you only have one solution. And then finally, if under your radical you get a negative, you have no solutions. So in this situation, you could have one of two things happening. You could either have your parabola sitting above the x-axis or have it sitting below the x-axis. So let's go ahead and get some practice with the discriminant portion first, because that's kind of a difficult piece to have. You're always going to start with your ABCs. Remember, your form is ax squared plus bx plus c. So if you look at number 1, what number is in the A position? Well, remember, there's an imaginary 1 there, so you have a 1. What number's in your B position? Good, a 3. And then what number's in your C position, the one with no x's? Great job, -4. So now when we substitute this into our discriminant formula, I like to use parentheses. So I'm going to rewrite my formula using parentheses. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. By doing that, I remind myself to be careful when I punch it in the calculator. So now I'm just going to substitute a, b, and c where it appears in our problem. So b is 3, so in parentheses 3 squared, minus 4 is part of our equation, times a is 1, and c is -4. So go ahead and punch that in your calculator or use your brain and come up with your answer. Did you get 25? Awesome. Because 25 is a positive number, it means that we have two real solutions. Let's try another. Looking at number 2, what number's in the A position? 5, good job. What number's in the B? Great, 10. And finally, the C is, you guessed it, 5. So again, I'm going to write that little hint for ourselves of all my parentheses, and now I'm just going to do some substitution stuff. So B is 10, so I have 10 squared. That -4 is part of our equation, and then A is 5, and C is 5. Good. So go ahead and punch that in your calculator. What did you come up with? Great job, a 0. Because the answer is 0, people want to say no solution, but no, this means that there's only one solution. Good. Let's go ahead and go to the back side of our notes. Looking at number 3, what are my A, B, and C equal to? Good, there's an imaginary 1 on the x squared, so A is a 1. Imaginary 1 on the B, so that's a 1. And then C is 12. Good. And just in case you haven't memorized it yet, we have in parentheses b squared minus 4 times A times C. Okay. So b squared is 1 squared. That -4 is part of our equation, times my A, which is 1, times my C, which is 12. Go ahead and punch that in your calculator. Yeah, you got -47. Good job. Great going there. So now that's a negative, think about it. Can we, remember it's under a radical, so can we square root a Negative? Of course not. So as soon as you get a negative under the radical, you can jump straight to the conclusion of no solution. Okay, so now how does this help us in finding our answers? Well, we can use the entire formula now to come up with the places where our function would cross the x-axis. So we're going to use our quadratic formula, and if you were in class, you would hear some songs for this to help memorize it. But we're going to be using that quadratic formula to find all of our answers. So if we go ahead and look at number 5, we're going to follow these steps in order to solve it. We're going to start by substituting a, b, and c for the entire equation now. Then we're going to simplify the discriminant and the denominator. So we're not square rooting anything else. Then we simplify our radical. And then finally, we combine and reduce. So it's a lot of steps. So I think it's easier to just go straight to it and start working. So looking at number 1, let's start with our ABCs. A is 1, B is -5, C is -14. Now, while you're still getting used to it, I highly suggest going through and writing your formula down. So it's the opposite of B plus or minus the square root. Remember we said all those parentheses? B squared in parentheses minus 4 times A times C all over 2A. Now that I wrote it down that way, it makes it easier when I go through and do my substitution. So with my substitution, the opposite of B, well, B is -5, so it's +5, plus or minus the square root, B squared, so -5 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is -14, good, all over 2 times A, which is 1. So step 1 is just substitute A, B, and C in. Step 2 is to go through and simplify what's under the radical. Notice I'm going to rewrite the 5 plus or minus the square root, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch in what's under that radical into my calculator. So I have -5 squared minus 4 times 1 times -14, and what do you guys get? Great, you got an 81, and that's all over, and now I'm going to simplify the denominator. What's 2 times 1? 2, good. So now step 3 says to simplify my radical. Well, what is the square root of 81? Exactly, it's 9. So I have 5 plus or minus 9 over 2. Now, do you see how I have that plus or minus sign? I'm going to write that in red to kind of draw attention to it. This plus or minus, that's where my 2 equations come from. So I have my 5 plus 9 over 2, and I have my 5 minus 9 over 2. That's the plus or minus. And now I simplify. What is 5 plus 9? Good. 14 divided by 2, which is 7. Good. What's 5 minus 9? Yes, -4 divided by 2 is? Great job, -2. So my 2 solutions are 7 and -2. Because those are exact answers, I can write NA for my approximate answers. Let's try another one because I realize that there are a lot of steps to do here. Remember, we always start with our A's, B's, and C's. So looking at my A's, B's, and C's, what is A equal to? Good, 5. What about B? Yes, 9. And then finally C? Awesome job, 4. So what's that formula again? I can't remember it. Yes, it's right above you. It's the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared. So B squared. Sorry, it looks a little sloppy. Let me rewrite that. Okay. So I have my B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. So now I'm going to substitute my numbers in. So what's the opposite of B? Well, if B is 9, the opposite would be -9 plus or minus the square root, B squared, so 9 squared, minus 4 times A, which is 5, good, times C. Yep, C is 4, good. All over 2 times A, which is 5, good. Equals -9 plus or minus the square root. This is where you need to punch stuff into your calculator. Go ahead and punch the discriminant into your calculator or use your brain. Either way works. And tell me what you come up with. Great job, you got a 1. And then what is 2 times 5? Yes, it's 10. So now I need to simplify my radical. So I have -9 plus or minus, what is the square root of 1? Yep, it's just 1 all over 10. Now that I simplified my radical, I can go through and do my positive equation and my minus equation. So I have -9 plus 1 over 10 and -9 minus 1 over 10. Let's do the top. What is -9 plus 1? Good job, it's -8 over 10. And then you should reduce your fractions. What can you divide them both by? Right, 2. So when I do that, what's -8 divided by 2? Great, -4. And 10 divided by 2 is? Yes, 5. So -4 over 5 is my first answer. And now I go through and do it again. What's -9 minus 1? Watch your signs. Yes, it's -10 over 10. If I divide that out, I get, you guessed it, -1. So those are my exact solutions. Now I need to do -4 divided by 5 in the calculator, and I come up with, yep, -0.8. And then you still write that -1 because it's part of the solution set. Awesome job. How's it going? I hope it's going pretty well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take one more problem and see what happens on this one. So what is that formula again that I'm trying to remember that I always forget? Just kidding, I don't forget it. Remember, it's the opposite of b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Now we substitute. Oh, we don't even know what a, b, and c is. What are a, b, and c? Good, a is 5. Yes, what's b? 12. Yep, and what's c? 11. Now I have something to substitute in. So what's the opposite of b? -12, plus or minus a square root, and we punch this all in. So we have 12 squared minus 4 times a, which is, yep, 5, times c, which is 11. Good. All over 2 times a, which is, again, 5. Awesome. So now remember, we need to simplify the discriminant and the denominator. So I have -12 plus or minus the square root. And what is 12 squared minus 4 times 5 times 11? Yeah, you get a -75 over, yep, 2 times 5 is 10. Uh-oh, there should be alarms going off in your head right now. We have a negative under the radical. So what does that tell us? Right, there is no solution. Good. Okay, we're actually going to skip number 8, and I'm going to have you guys write a different problem down below. So I would like you guys to go ahead and, let me hide this really fast, move the page. We're going to go ahead and we're going to try a different problem. So we're going to make this our new number 8. So for number 8, I want to use the equation 2x squared minus 5x minus 4 equals 0. We're going to start by identifying our a, our b, and our c. So what is a equal to in this new equation that we're going to use? Right, it's equal to 2. And what is b equal to? Yes, -5. And finally, c is? Good, -4. So what's that formula that we keep using over and over? The opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. So now let's do some substitution. What's the opposite of b? Right, a +5 plus or minus the square root. And then what's my b? Yep, -5 squared minus 4 times, what number's in the a position? You guessed it, 2, and c is? Great, -4 all over 2 times a, which is 2. Good. Okay, so I have 5 plus or minus the square root. Punch in your calculator, -5 squared. Make sure you put that -5 in parentheses. And then -4 times 2 times -4. And what number do you come up with? Yes, you come up with 57 all over. What is 2 times 2? 4. Awesome. So if we look at 57, can I divide 57 by anything? Yeah, I can divide it by 3. I get 3 times 19. Do you see how both of these are prime numbers? That means that I cannot break down that 57. This is the kind of number that you actually like Because we can't break down 57, this one right here is our exact answer. To get the approximate now, we need to separate it into two equations. I have 5 plus the square root of 57 divided by 4. And I have 5 minus the square root of 57 divided by 4. Now notice how I use two different colors. The reason I use two different colors is because I can't enter this all in my calculator at once. I need to hit an equal sign when I go from red to blue. So the first thing I'm going to type in is 5 plus the square root of 57. And I come up with 12.5. Now I can go through and divide that by 4. So my first solution is 3.1. I'm going to do the same thing for the other one. Make sure you're trying it in your calculator as well so you don't end up confusing your numbers. So now I'm going to do 5 minus the square root of 57. Yes, I get negative 2.5. Now I can divide that number by 4 and I get, good, you get negative 0.6. These two answers are my approximate answers. Okay, so I think you guys have enough skills from these notes to be able to go through and do your classwork. Just take your time, go through it step by step, and you guys should be okay. I hope you guys enjoyed learning your quadratic formula. Thanks and have a great day. Bye.